Welcome back. Well, in addition to dealing with the perennial stumbling blocks to peace, Tony Blair faces another major hurdle, gaining credibility with the players. A long-standing intimate ally of George Bush, Mr. Blair was the most vigorous supporter of the invasion of Iraq. Many think he'll continue to be seen merely as a mouthpiece for the president. He also lost standing in the Arab world for his refusal to condemn Israel during last year's bloody war with Hezbollah in Lebanon. On top of that, Britain has a long history that's not easily forgotten of questionable intervention in Middle Eastern affairs. So can he win over the cynics? Joining me again to discuss that are in London, George Jones, political editor of the Daily Telegraph, Abdul Bari Atwan, he's the editor of the Al-Quds Al-Arabi newspaper, and in Jerusalem, Gil Hoffman, chief correspondent and columnist at the Jerusalem Post. George Jones, if I could come to you again, sir. Regarding the specifics, we know that as Prime Minister, Tony Blair wasn't categorically denouncing Israeli settlements. He wasn't categorically denouncing the wall and many issues that infuriated Palestinians. Can we say that Blair, the envoy, will be very different to Blair, the Prime Minister?
Well, Blair would say that as Prime Minister, he did push President George Bush to accept, and I think George Bush is the first US president to specifically say there needs to be a two-state solution in the Middle East. That is, a viable Palestinian state and an Israel secure in its own borders. So Tony Blair would say that he has actually sought to get that kind of commitment, that he pushed for the roadmap. But I think now he will lose. He's got a credibility problem, a credibility gap. If he is seen as the mouthpiece of George Bush, he will gain no credibility. And I think Tony Blair is well aware of that. But what Tony Blair has, he has an ability to talk to people. I think when people meet him, they will find that he is open to what they say. I think he is going to go and see as many Arab leaders as he can. And I think he's going to try and demonstrate that he is somebody who wants to bring people together. Now, if everybody says they won't talk to him, if they hold the Lebanon war last summer against him, if they hold Iraq against him, well, nothing will happen in this. But actually, in Tony Blair, there is someone who really wants to do something. I mean, he will work at this. And he is, he is giving up the opportunity to make a lot of money to do this. He is also putting his own personal security at risk, going into places where he knows there are people who may well want to kind of kill him or assassinate him. But I think that if he is given a chance, I think he will demonstrate that he does want to try and create that two-state solution.
Abdul Bari Atwan, besides the issue of Blair personally and his issue of credibility or lack of credibility, what about the roadmap itself? Do many in the Middle East see that it lacks credibility and that it may be a flawed framework? The original text of the roadmap says that it called for a viable Palestinian state by 2005. 2005 came and went. Do you think that the roadmap itself could have some problems?
The roadmap actually was promoted simply because Tony Blair and George Bush wanted to facilitate the war against Iraq, and they want to throw a very little carrots to the Middle Eastern people. So it was part of this spin doctor psychology. They want to deceive the Arab world again and the Palestinian people again. Usually when they are preparing for a war, they come out with a settlement. But Bush, the senior, did the same in 1991 before he bombed Iraq and evacuated the Iraqi forces from Kuwait, and also in 2001 after 11th of September they came out with peace deals, Madrid conference before that. So it is actually a part of the deception process of the Middle East. President Bush and his poodle Tony Blair promised the Palestinians they will establish independent Palestinian states before 2005. We are in 2007, and what happened? Nothing at all. Where is the roadmap? Is torn apart by the Israeli prime ministers. Where is peace process? Is completely dead and buried. A new wall is built on the Palestinian territories, and we know that new settlements are built. And to talk about withdrawal from Gaza Strip, I would like to remind your speaker or your guest from Jerusalem that there are 7,000 Palestinians. They are actually on the other side of the border crossing of Rafah. They are really dying of hunger and desperation, and nobody is paying attention attention to them. So this is because the Israeli refused to open Rafah border crossing. This is the Israeli withdrawal of Gaza Strip.
Okay,
and
let's get Gil Hoffman to respond. Gil Hoffman, Abdul Bari, I'm sorry to interrupt. Abdul Bari Atwan saying that Israeli gestures for peace are a bit of a facade. What do you make of that?
I think Israel is doing everything possible to show the Palestinian people how serious Israel is about wanting to improve the lives of the Palestinian people. We've seen just over the last few days, there's going to be a meeting tomorrow between Prime Minister Ehud Olmert and the Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas. Olmert is not going to be coming to that meeting empty-handed by any means. He's going to be telling him that Israel's willing to release immediately 250 Palestinian prisoners from jail without blood on their hands, which means people that didn't succeed in killing people, people that tried to kill people but didn't succeed. That's a major concession on Israel's part, a concession that many Israelis oppose. He's also going to be granting amnesty to many Palestinians that Israel considers wanted criminals, again, people that either tried to kill people or even did kill people but just haven't been arrested yet. And Israel said they're not going to try to arrest them in order to try to boost Abu Mazen and move the peace process forward. Israel's really doing everything possible to improve the lives of the Palestinian people. It's really just
I'm going to have to stop you there because I just want to broaden it out slightly. Sure. I just want to talk about the neighbours. George Jones, if we could talk a little bit about Syria very briefly. How is Blair going to deal with the Syrians, particularly since the Golan Heights is a central issue with regards to peace?
Well, Tony Blair has met President Assad of Syria. I mean, he did have an attempt at sort of improving relations there. So, I mean, again, he is known in Damascus. He has been there. He knows the Syrians. I mean, in the end, there probably will have to be land for peace. And I think he will try and facilitate some form of negotiations there. The worry is, of course, are we preparing, or is there going to be another war between Israel and Lebanon? I mean, it is a cauldron. Tony Blair knows that, but he will go round, he will use his own influence, and he will try and persuade Syria and Israel. I mean, in the end, that is where many of these progress is going to come. If Tony Blair can use his influence with Syria, I mean, I'm not sure whether he can use it with Iran at this stage, but Iran and its support for Hamas, I mean, in a way, there are big players involved in this, people fighting proxy wars in Gaza and in Lebanon. So Tony Blair knows that, and I think he knows.
All right, George Jones, I'm going to have to interrupt you because I need some concluding comments from the other two gentlemen. Also in London, Abdul Bari Atwan, I know you're not a fan of Blair's new role, but can he in any way initiate some sort of momentum?
Well, I think, this is a bad sign. It seems that usually when Tony Blair and President Bush talk about peace in the Middle East or reviving the peace process, it means there is another war in the region. So I wouldn't surprise if, we are heading toward another war in the Middle East, which is against Iran. So I think Tony Blair will give a camouflage for this war, maybe Israeli war against Lebanon. And just to go back to say that Israeli are releasing 250 Palestinians, I would like to remind you that the Israeli have more than 11,500 Palestinian prisoners, and those 250, they are just nearly finishing their imprisonment. So I think without Israeli being extremely flexible and to implement UN Security Council resolutions,
I'm sorry, I'm going to have to interrupt you. We're running out of time. We've got 30 seconds left on the show. Very quickly, yes or no, Sir Gil Hoffman, is a permanent status agreement possible with Blair as the Quartet's envoy?
A permanent status agreement is more possible than ever with Tony Blair as the Middle East envoy. Things will start moving.
All right, I'm going to have to stop you there. I'm
going
to have to stop you. Thank you very much for your opinions. Thank you very much, gentlemen. Abdul Bari Atwan, George Jones and Gil Hoffman. And thank you so much for joining us here on this edition of Inside Story.